Hey, hello there. How you doing? Hey, it's Nick Digilio. Thanks. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Almost daily videos with movie reviews and rants and stories and things like that. Movie reviews are a little bit on hold for about a week or so until some more new movies come out. But I'll be talking about that and the year-end best of, worst of 2021, all of that fun stuff. And please leave your comments and your thoughts here on the YouTube channel. So this past week on this network, Up TV, which I'm not very familiar with. I don't watch it. I think it's a sort of a, hey, we like God kind of a network, considering that they kept showing My Pillow commercials throughout this whole week as I've been watching on and off. Well, they just finished up a Gilmore Girls marathon, and it was fun to go back and the first 6 seasons of Gilmore Girls are great. The 7th season, the last season, is awful. But then they rebooted it in 2016 for 4 mini movies that would be winter, spring, summer, and fall that showed up on Netflix, and they were great, and they totally made up for how bad season 7 was. Anyway, they showed all of that in a huge marathon. And I watched a lot of it, most of it, in fact. And I'm a huge Gilmore Girls fan, always have. It's one of my favorite shows ever. One of the great cast members on that show was Edward Herrmann. Edward Herrmann played Richard Gilmore, the father of Lorelai, the grandfather of Rory, the patriarch of the Gilmore family. And he was great on the show, as he was in so many other things. Edward Herrmann, you probably remember, he played FDR in a couple of miniseries on TV. He was in Reds and Purple Rose of Cairo and Overboard. He was in The Lost Boys. He won a Tony for a lot of his work on stage. He was in Annie. He actually even played Herman Munster in a revival. But a terrific, tall, big actor who you would remember from those things. Great guy. And he was the father on Gilmore Girls. Anyway, I bring that up because I once met Edward Herrmann, and it was in this pub called O'Rourke's. So I have a couple of stories that are O'Rourke's related. O'Rourke's, for those of you who might not know, O'Rourke's was a legendary bar in Chicago. When I was a drinking man, I preferred bars that you could go to where you could just sit at the bar and talk and get really drunk. I liked that. I liked old man bars. I liked corner bars. I liked bars with regulars, and I was a regular at a few bars, most notably Simon's in Andersonville. I drank there as a regular for many years. I even worked there for a while for many years. Another one was Ginger's Ale House over on Ashland and Grace. Drank there for many years, also worked there. That was a regular bar that I hung out at. And Ties Till 4 was another one, 4 o'clock bar. Oddly, I worked there as well. And then there was Ricochet's, which was the place I drank at the most up until I quit drinking. And that was a regular bar on the corner in Lincoln Square and filled with regulars and people who were there every night. I got drunk there many, 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 many nights. But one of the first bars that I ever became a true regular at was O'Rourke's. O'Rourke's was a legendary bar that was on the corner of North Avenue and Orleans in Old Town. The history of this bar is unbelievable. The writers who would hang out there. There was Roger Ebert's. When Roger Ebert was a drinker, he quit drinking in '79. Roger was an alcoholic, fully admits it, and spent many a night, almost every night, at O'Rourke's on the corner of North and Orleans. But there were beautiful blown-up pictures of Irish writers on the wall, and it was a great place. It was dark and wooden, had a wonderful front window with the name O'Rourke's on it. It had a massive history in terms of performers and actors and writers and historians, newspapermen. It was a real big bar for newspapermen who would go there after working and just get shit-faced. One of the best jukebox, full of jazz. It was just a great place, great dark place to get really fucking drunk. It was a bar where you could talk, meet really interesting people, and get shit-faced. And O'Rourke's was a real special bar. a guy who started out as a bartender there and then who eventually became co-owner and full owner was a guy named Jay Kovar. Jay was O'Rourke's. He was O'Rourke's. The first time I ever went in there, he was behind the bar, as he was, almost all the time. And I started going there in the 80s when I was hanging out in Old Town, and I was doing Second City. I was taking Second City, and some people were like, "Hey, you got to go to O'Rourke's." And so the idea was you would go to O'Rourke's. O'Rourke's was closed at 2, and then you would go down the street to the Old Town Ale House, which of course is still there, because that had the 4 o'clock license. So when you closed O'Rourke's at 2, you were shit-faced, you stumbled down to the Old Town Ale House, and you stayed there until the sun came up. That was kind of what happened back in those days. So I went there and I started hanging out during my days at Second City in the 80s, and then I got to know John Cusack kind of well, and at that time he was living with Jeremy Piven, and they lived right on Orleans, right up the street from O'Rourke's. And when they would rehearse their plays with New Crime Productions, they would go, after rehearsals, they would end up at O'Rourke's, and I was hanging out with them. So I spent a significant amount of time for about 2 years hanging out with Cusack and with Piven, and I knew them very, very well, hung out with them all the time, went back to their place. So I knew John and I knew Jeremy a long time ago, and their place, their chosen place to drink was O'Rourke's, and we were there pretty much every night, especially like in the almost the entire year of 1989. O'Rourke's then closed at the end of 1989. Their location at North Avenue in Orleans, they closed down. And I remember the night they closed, I was there. It was in November of 1989, and it was packed. It was a huge party. Roger Ebert showed up with Chaz, and he was in a tux, even though he didn't drink anymore, but he had to be there because it was a legend. In my opinion, maybe the best bar that's ever been in this city. O'Rourke's, the best bar in Chicago history, as far as I'm concerned. So tons of people showed up. I remember Jay got up and danced on the bar. He was on top of the bar. The whole place was going nuts. We were there till after 2 o'clock, well after 2. Like, who gives a shit if they shut us down? Who cares about the license only being till 2? The place was packed. Lots of celebrities, lots of people showing up, and Jay held court, Jay Kovar. We lost Jay, and then in 2018 he passed away, unfortunately, but he was like the coolest guy ever, and I got to know him. If you went to O'Rourke's on a regular basis, he was a really cool guy. Actually bought you many rounds of drinks. He was the quintessential bartender. He had Chicago in his DNA, and he was an amazing, amazing dude. Now, when O'Rourke's moved to a spot on Halstead, which would eventually be right across the street from Steppenwolf, where they would reopen on Halstead near North Avenue, it just wasn't the same. It was still awesome. We still went there on a regular basis, my friends and I. It just wasn't the same. That spot, that bar on North and Orleans, there was just something special about it. But we still went, and Jay was still behind the bar. Jay fully owned the place at that point, and it still had the wonderful portraits of the Irish writers on the wall. It was still a place to go to get really drunk and to have great conversation and to spot stars and writers and actors and directors. John still went there. John Cusack still would go there. We would hang out there every once in a while. But it became more of a draw for hipsters because it was on Halstead and it was near that area where a lot of people went to some of the bars on Halstead Street to dance and things like that. So, and more tourists came in. It was a nicer bar. Even though they had like a very small trough urinal in the men's room. And again, the people that would come and see the Steppenwolf shows would come in for a drink afterwards. So there was like the theater crowd, but it wasn't like the grungy theater crowd from back in the day. Like Steppenwolf started out in a church basement, and now they had like this multi-million-dollar facility on Halstead. So the crowd was different, the attitude was different, and they would get more stars to come in. And so people who would be in the shows would come in, like the actors and the actresses would come in to O'Rourke's after a show. So we would still go there. It wasn't quite the same. It was still awesome. It was still the best bar to go to. It just did not have the magic that Orleans and North Avenue location did. So a couple of quick celebrity moments at O'Rourke's when it was on Halstead across from Steppenwolf. The first one was John Mahoney. If you've listened to my show when I was on WEGN, I have this story about John Mahoney. John Mahoney, obviously a Chicago legend, an amazing actor who really didn't even get his start till his late 40s, has appeared in a ton of movies that you would remember him from, and he was obviously Frasier's father on Frasier, and he was a true Chicagoan, a great stage actor. Anybody who ever worked with him in the Chicago theater knows what an incredibly nice, generous, amazing man John Mahoney was. Truly a gift from God, John Mahoney. Obviously a great actor, and stayed true to Chicago, even though he was a movie star. He was in stuff like Moonstruck, Primal Fear. He was in a ton of movies. His roots were here in Chicago. Well, he was in a movie called Say Anything with John Cusack, and actually, when I was hanging out with John the most frequent was when that movie came out. That's when I knew John the most, was in around that time when Say Anything came out, and it became obviously a big hit. People really love it, and John Mahoney played Ione Skye's father in that movie. Ione Skye was this girl who was from the better side of town than John Cusack, and they should have never been together. You probably know the whole movie. He wasn't supposed to be with her. They end up falling in love, and John Mahoney's character ends up going to jail for some tax evasion issues that he did, and he ends up going to jail, and John Cusack and Ione Skye at the end of the movie end up going off to London together. So it's a great movie. Cameron Crowe wrote and directed it. It's still fantastic to this day. An amazing cast, including a very early role for Pamela Adlon. And it's just great. People love it. It's a beloved movie. And John Mahoney is fantastic in it. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance. So there's a moment in Say Anything where John Cusack visits John Mahoney, who is now in prison. He visits him because they're going to go off, Ione Skye and John Mahoney are going to go off to London, and he wants to make sure that he gives this letter to John Mahoney from Ione Skye. They're not speaking anymore. So he visits him in prison to give this letter to her so that there is some sort of closure between the father and daughter. So his character is named Lloyd Dobler. That's the character that John Cusack plays. And he goes to visit Mahoney, goes up to him, and Mahoney's in his orange little outfit, his prison jumpsuit. Cusack goes to visit him, and he says to Mahoney, he says, "Well, so how you doing, sir?" And Mahoney responds with, "I'm incarcerated, Lloyd," which is my favorite line in the entire movie. "I'm incarcerated, Lloyd." You go back and watch that scene. It's my favorite line in the entire movie. It's actually one of my favorite lines in film history, from the line itself, which I just think is a great line, and also the way Mahoney delivers it. So I love that line. It was just like, "Oh, I'm incarcerated, Lloyd." Just one of those lines that sticks with you. You say it over and over again. And it's my favorite line in Say Anything, and one of my favorite things that John Mahoney has ever said in anything. So, I had met John Mahoney here and there, through my connection with Roy Leonard, WGN Radio. So one night we're at O'Rourke's, and this again is when it was on Halstead after it reopened. And my friends are there. A bunch of us were sitting in a booth. We're drinking, which is what you did at O'Rourke's. You talked, you played jazz on the jukebox, and you got drunk. That's what you did at O'Rourke's. But the main thing was the drinking and the talking. So we're having a conversation. We're talking as we would a lot, because we went there regularly. And all of a sudden, because the theater was across the street, Mahoney was in a play across the street, and he came in. And everybody was like, ooh. When people came into O'Rourke's, you kind of looked, but you wanted to be cool, because it wasn't that kind of bar. You didn't go up and fucking bother people. They were there for the same reason. They wanted to have some drinks, and they wanted to have a nice conversation and talk with people. That's why people went to O'Rourke's. So I didn't want to bother him. There's John Mahoney. He comes in. He's at the end of the bar, right by the front window. Jay is behind the bar. As he often was, the fantastic late, great Jay Kovar. And Mahoney comes in, and he's kind of sitting there, and he's talking, and, we're all like, hey, it's John Mahoney, he's awesome, he's the best. And this was probably around 1990 or so, 1990, 91. So this was obviously pre-Frasier. So we're having some drinks, and I've had a bunch. So I was probably a little, I definitely was a little drunk. So I decided, I'm going to go up, and I got to go up, and I have to say something to John Mahoney. So my friends are sitting there, so he's up at the bar, he's having a conversation, so I walk up to him, And my friends are like, oh shit, Nick's drunk and he's going to go bother John Mahoney. So I walk up to Mahoney and he just kind of looks at me and he goes, oh, hello. And he reaches his hand out as a gentleman would. And I take his hand, I shake his hand, I say hi. And then I pull his hand toward me and I go, I'm incarcerated, Lloyd. And then I let go of his hand and I kind of turn to walk away and he busts out laughing. Now, if you've ever seen Frasier, if you've ever seen any of the movies, if you've ever worked with Mahoney, you know he's got that laugh. Mahoney has a very he's got a very distinctive laugh that you would know only John Mahoney had. And he busted out laughing. I was very happy about that because I thought he was going to punch me. Because some asshole comes up to you and goes, I'm incarcerated, Lloyd! Like screams a line at you and then walks away. So I was drunk and I kind of walked away and he laughed his ass off. He thought it was hilarious and he bought my table a round of drinks. And then before the end of the night, I went up and said, thank you very much, and thanked him. So it was great. It was hilarious. My friends thought it was hilarious. The people that were with him thought it was funny. Just some drunk asshole walks up to him, screams, I'm incarcerated, Lloyd, right in his face and walks away. So years and years later, Entertainment Weekly was doing this article in their magazine commemorating the 25th or the 20th anniversary of Say Anything in the magazine. And they got everybody. They got Cusack, they got Ione Skye, they got Cameron Crowe, and they got Mahoney. And they interviewed all the people, and they were talking about the success of the movie, the surprise success, and the longevity, and how people love it. And so they were interviewing Mahoney, and Mahoney says, one of my favorite stories about Say Anything was I was in this Chicago bar, and I was having a drink, and some fan came up. He had a few, and he just came up to me, and he grabbed my hand, and he screamed, I'm incarcerated, Lloyd, into my face, and it was hilarious. And it's one of my favorite memories about that movie. And that was me. That was me. When I read that in Entertainment Weekly, I was like, hey, there was nobody in the room with me, but I was like, hey, he's talking about me. I was that drunk asshole who came up to him and screamed, I'm incarcerated, Lloyd, into his face. So it's nice to know that years later he actually really, didn't think I was an asshole, actually thought it was great. And it's one of his favorite memories that he associated with making Say Anything and the after effect that it had on people. And it was in the Entertainment Weekly. And I still have that issue somewhere in a box somewhere where I was that drunk dickhead who walked up to him. So that was another great moment in O'Rourke's. There were many, many great moments that I've had over the years in O'Rourke's. Back in the original spot, and then the spot on Halstead. The second one, and the reason I bring this whole thing up is because of Edward Herrmann, whom I just watched hours and hours of, because he played Richard Gilmore in Gilmore Girls. And Edward Herrmann, we loved Edward Herrmann. My friends and I loved Edward Herrmann. Again, this was pre-Gilmore Girls. We were at O'Rourke's, again, on Halstead. And again, we were in the booth and we were drinking. And my friends and I were all drunk. The last story that I told you, I was probably the drunkest at the table, but at this point we were all pretty hammered. And a couple of friends of mine and I were just kind of sitting there, we're talking, and Edward Herrmann walks in, much like Mahoney, and you knew him because Edward Herrmann was like 6'10". He was a huge guy. So, and we were fans of him. He was a supporting actor, one of those character actor guys that you would know. But he didn't have like a fan club. He wasn't like ultra popular. But the kind of actors that my friends and Scott and Dan and John, we liked the character actor guys. We embraced, like for instance, Scott Oaken and my late friend Joe Donatello and I went to a Fangoria convention in L.A. a bunch of years ago, 40 years ago. Well, not 40 years ago, but